I made escape plans everywhere I went. If something happens, how do I get out? What can I use to defend myself? Who can help? And then there are the panic attacks. The kind that slam into me like a tsunami out of nowhere. I can't breathe. I can't think. I can't stop shaking.
Hi everyone, it's Ruby G.
And I'm Joff.
Welcome to Truth and Neurons.
The mainstream media narrative that emerged in the months following the homicides painted Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk as severely traumatised young women, withdrawn from social life, struggling with PTSD, barely functioning in the aftermath of unimaginable horror. News outlets ran stories describing them as shattered survivors. Publications quoted anonymous sources claiming they were receiving intensive therapy, and public sympathy positioned them as secondary victims whose lives had been irreparably damaged by witnessing violence. This narrative served multiple functions. It explained their 8-hour delay in calling 911 as a trauma response. It justified the prosecution's decision to shield them from intensive scrutiny. It generated public protectiveness that discouraged questions about their behaviour. And it established them as credible witnesses whose testimony, however inconsistent, should be accepted because trauma distorts memory and behaviour. The PTSD framework became armour that deflected legitimate psychological and investigative questions about their actual roles in these events.
However, social media evidence that has emerged progressively in the months and years following the murders tells a starkly different story. Photographs and videos posted by Dylan, Bethany and their social connections show them at parties, attending social events, participating in Greek life activities, travelling, celebrating and engaging in typical college social behaviour, with no visible signs of the withdrawal, hypervigilance, emotional numbing or social avoidance that characterise genuine PTSD. These images don't show young women struggling to leave their homes, unable to be around crowds, triggered by reminders of trauma, or exhibiting the flat affect and dissociative presentations that trauma survivors display for months or even years after severe exposure. Instead, they show young women who appear psychologically intact, socially engaged, emotionally regulated, and capable of enjoying life in ways fundamentally inconsistent with the PTSD diagnosis the media ascribed to them. Socially engaged, emotionally regulated, and capable of enjoying life in ways fundamentally inconsistent with PTSD diagnosis the media ascribed to them.
The disconnect between reported trauma and observed behaviour creates what clinicians call a symptom validity problem. The claimed presentation doesn't match objective evidence of functioning. Genuine PTSD following witnessing of quadruple homicides in one's own home would produce specific measurable behavioural changes. Victims would show hyperarousal, that is, heightened startle response, difficulty sleeping, constant scanning for threats. It would also produce avoidance, like the inability to return to similar environments, avoidance of reminders, social withdrawal. It would also produce intrusive symptoms like flashbacks, nightmares, unwanted memories, and negative alterations in mood and cognition, such as emotional numbing and difficulty experiencing positive emotions, sense of a foreshortened future. These symptoms don't come and go for photo opportunities. They're pervasive, interfering with normal functioning, and visible to observers even when victims try to mask them. The ability to attend parties, smile genuinely for cameras, engage in celebratory activities, and maintain active social lives within months, if not days, of alleged trauma exposure suggests either the trauma wasn't as severe as claimed, the witnesses have extraordinary resilience rarely seen in clinical populations, or the trauma narrative was constructed rather than experienced.
The specific timeline of their social media presence adds psychological significance. If we see gradual return to social functioning over years, initial withdrawal followed by slow, cautious re-engagement, that pattern aligns with trauma recovery. But if we can see rapid return to normal or near normal social functioning within weeks or months, with party attendance, celebratory social media posts appearing while the case is still actively being processed, that pattern contradicts trauma psychology. People genuinely devastated by witnessing violence don't typically feel comfortable in party environments shortly after. The crowd's noise, chaos, and loss of control trigger trauma responses that make environments intolerable. The fact that Dylan and Bethany could comfortably participate in exactly the kinds of social settings where the murders occurred, house parties, Greek life events, gatherings with alcohol, and large groups, suggests either the trauma was minimal or their relationship to the events was fundamentally different than the innocent witness narrative requires.
The concept of impression management becomes relevant, the strategic presentation of self to create desired perceptions in others. If Dylan and Bethany needed public belief in their trauma to maintain their protective status as victims rather than face scrutiny as potential participants or knowing accomplices, they would have incentive to perform trauma for media, investigators and public consumption while privately maintaining normal social functioning. The party photos that emerge later might represent not recovery from trauma, but revelation of an actual psychological state that was always present but carefully hidden from official channels.
That's the pipe, that's my type, nigga, that's my type. Let's do it.
Isn't just speculation, it's a documented pattern in cases involving deceptive witnesses. They perform the expected emotional states when under observation, such as interviews, court proceedings, interactions with investigators, while maintaining different private lives revealed only through inadvertent documentation by friends, social media posts they didn't control, or photographs they didn't realise would become public. The contrast between their public persona and private behaviour raises fundamental questions about everything we were told about their psychological states. If they weren't severely traumatised, if they could function normally within a short period of time after the events, if they could smile genuinely and enjoy parties and social gatherings without apparent triggers or distress, then what does that tell us about their actual experience that night? People who witness horrific violence in their immediate environment, who spend 8 hours in a house with 4 dead bodies, who discover brutally murdered friends, these people don't bounce back to party life, not within days, weeks, or even months. The psychological research is clear. Proximity to extreme violence, especially violence against known individuals in familiar environments, produces lasting trauma markers that interfere with normal functioning for years. The absence of these markers in Dylan and Bethany's observable behaviour suggests proximity to violence that was different than claimed. Their relationship to victims was different than portrayed, or their knowledge of events was different than they've admitted. In any of these scenarios, the PTSD narrative collapses, and with it, the justification for treating them as protected victims, rather than investigated witnesses or potential suspects whose behaviour demands explanation rather than sympathy.